Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Brian McRae, and this is Freedom to Create, finding purpose, joy, and success as a solo dev. Hey everybody, so in this video I want to talk about AAA versus indie, pros and cons. I have been in the industry for a long time. I have spent years in both areas, indie more now than AAA, but I had a very good taste of both, and I could break it down for you. So here we go. So let's start with AAA. So I worked at a place called High Voltage, then Midway, and then Blizzard. And I could tell you all three places were great places to work. Now, this was in the early days of Xbox, One, so 2000s, early 2000s. And it was common at that time for you to work 10, 12, 14-hour days pretty consistently. Sometimes there were lulls where you would only work 8-hour days or sometimes even less. You'd work a 16-hour day and they would let people go, earlier the next day. But most of the time it was just a lot of hours, right? It was long hours. And that was just the way it was. We were happy to have those jobs. And because of that, and because there were so few jobs, you just wanted to hold on to what you could. And we knew how competitive each job was. So we knew that for each person sitting at a desk, there was 1,000 people sitting behind you that wanted that job. And so we respected the job, we respected what we were doing, and we did the best that we could to prop up the company, prop up the project so that we could continue working in this creative field and creative industry. I think nowadays AAA has gotten much better. I'm hearing less and less stories of perpetual crunch, and a lot of companies have gone to an hourly system as opposed to a salary, so you literally get paid for every hour that you're there. And that's the way that I have treated staff that have worked for me. I think it's a more fair way to go, and I think that is kind of becoming the norm, and I think that's great. So another big benefit of AAA is you're working around people who are great at what they do. Everybody there is amazing because they were all the cream of the crop that got in at these positions, and these companies have their choice over who they hire, and it's a very competitive marketplace. So you could learn a lot. You get better faster working in a AAA environment because you just learn so much. And then you hear stories from everybody. You go out to lunch and you hear stories about other jobs that other people have had and what they've learned and what's going on, and different processes of development or different design theories or just different ways of even, creating art. And you learn a lot. You learn a lot about how to be a professional too, how to roll with the punches, how to have a good attitude, have a good work ethic. And it all kind of comes down to being a positive person and a team player. So it also teaches you how to hit milestones, how to say no to things, because you just can't fit it in. Even if you add the hours and so on, there's just not enough time in the day to do everything. And it's okay to cut features, especially at the AAA level where you're not working publicly, you're kind of working stealth. And that's a luxury to be in because you could pivot and try different things in your design and not have to contend with an audience who has already been exposed and maybe even giving you feedback on your project. So it's also, really great for networking. The more people that you know in the profession, the more sort of job security you have, because as people go to different jobs, they'll remember you and they'll suggest you, and then getting a job at another place becomes easier and easier. So it's I think AAA is a great place to be. Indie. I think being an indie is a lot harder in a lot of ways, but can be a lot more fulfilling. And so here's why. It's harder because there's nobody looking over your shoulder and directing you. You have to do all the direction yourself, but then that's also the benefit because you have all this freedom. But freedom could be a double-edged sword, and a lot of people fall on it, right? If you don't have deadlines, if there's nobody over your shoulder telling you what to do, then you could just decide not to work and then things slip and nothing happens, Conversely, if you're driven you could get so much work done in 2 or 3 days. You could work all night if you want to, and nobody's going to stop you. The other problem, though, is you're usually not getting a paycheck while all this is happening. So that part of it really could mess with your mind, because when you're at a job, you know that no matter what happens, you're going to be able to see that paycheck at the end of the week or whenever it's due for you. But when you're an indie and you're working off of the royalties of your game or your project coming out and being successful, you don't know when that's going to be. You don't know how much it's going to be. You don't know if you're going to see any return at all. And that could be a very stressful situation. There's a place kind of in between these two, and that would be the work for hire indie, I'd like to call it. And that is an independent studio who creates projects or games or apps for other companies. And I've had this in my career as well. And in a lot of ways, that was my favorite type of business, because you kind of had the best of both worlds. You had these great projects that you're working on, and you knew, because there was a contract and there was milestones, and as long as you were delivering your milestones and doing well, working with the producers of that project, that you would get paid, and you knew how much you were going to get paid. And so you could bank on it. You could structure a budget for yourself, for your own personal life and everything. And what a lot of indie developers did, and what we did, is while that's happening and you're doing these other projects, you could work on your own stuff on the side. And then it becomes really fun, because nothing's really riding on that. That's just an extra thing that you're doing. And that's a very healthy way to go. In fact, even though I had a game that went to #1 on Steam, I made more money on being an indie studio who was working on projects for other studios, other companies, and in a lot of ways having a lot more freedom and a lot more fun. So, everyone seems to be chasing this whole like indie dream, like I'm gonna make this game and I'm gonna get all this fame and fortune, and it's a hard dream. And even if you achieve it, you might not achieve it to the level that you want in any of those categories. You really don't know how it's going to play out. The audience is so chaotic. You have no idea which way it's going to go. So I would suggest, if you're just starting out and you want to get into making video games, I would suggest trying to find a vocation and get into AAA first and cut your teeth on that. Get some experience. Have that primary skill that you could hang your hat on later. For me, it was 3D art. And specifically environment art. And if you look back at my career, my environment art has been my foundation all the way through, and something that I know I could depend on to get me that excitement that I'm looking for when I get something in front of an audience. Is they'll look at my environment art and say, "Oh, that looks great. I can't wait to play that." If you don't have a key skill like that, and you try to get into the industry as an indie, and you're just trying to make it on the open platforms, you're going to have a really hard go. I'm telling you right now, because you're not going to have any strong skill to fall back on, except for maybe game design, because you've played a lot of games and are using that to come into the fold. But I would argue that the other thing that you're not thinking of is you don't know enough to know what you don't know, especially when you're coming in fresh from the consumer side of things. You think you might understand game design because you've played a lot of different games and you're thinking about what you would tweak and what have you. But I guarantee you, if you're looking at a new design document and it's a blank slate, it's a very daunting thing. You can't just take somebody else's game and mod it and call it your own. You have to build your own original project that hasn't been done before. And then how do you do that and make it similar enough to other games that people still could latch on to it, but unique enough where it stands on its own merit? And it's a very, very difficult and challenging thing, and sometimes takes years to even come up with the right idea and the execution of the idea. And then on top of that, you're writing trends. There's trends, and the market's always changing, and all the world's changing under your feet as you're developing that. And in some respects, you need to kind of adapt to the moving plate tectonics, if you will, while you're working on your project, so that when you do come out, you're coming out in the best possible way. So it's a lot to think about. And again, another reason why I would suggest going into AAA if you can get a good job doing 3D art, programming, or design specifically, and go from there. So I hope you found this helpful. It's definitely something that comes up a lot when I talk to people. And, since I've spent a lot of time of my life in both camps, I think I have a pretty unique perspective that I could share on that. And I wanted to, just share that with you so that you had more of an understanding and this information as you make your decisions on your own journey. So, okay, well, thanks so much for joining, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Freedom to Create. Until next time, be sure to design, develop, test, repeat.